Jyotirgmaya, from darkness to light. And this is exactly what our next speaker has done for many, many lives. A recipient of multiple awards for social impact in education, a BTech from IIT Madras, and a PhD from University of Maryland with an AIR of 4, he continually lives his promise of making the world a better place. Without stealing any of his thunder, please join me in welcoming Dr. Balaji Sampath.
Sharbat, one sec.
Yeah.
I have a poll out, okay? That needs to happen. So please answer the poll as quickly as you can, and then we'll move on to Balaji. Sorry, Balaji. Just a few more seconds. All right, Balaji, off you go.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here. So thanks for inviting me. I would like to just quickly share a small presentation as well. So basically, if we look at it, I'm part of a non-profit group that I helped start, Aid India. It's the 25th year this year. And our focus and the mission is reaching the poorest and providing the best. Because the providing the best is very, very important, because many times when people look at reaching the poorest, they look at it as something where you do a little bit and that's good enough. So we feel that making sure that the children are learning really well when we do an education program, when we construct homes, making sure that they are able to not just get a slightly better living condition, but something which is dramatically different and resets their way of thinking. I think these are important to do. And so very quickly, I will go on to some of the programs. About myself, basically I did my PhD from the University of Maryland after IIT. And during that time, I got involved in a lot of this work. I have also been, after that I came back to India and started Aid India. And for the last 25 years, that has been one of my main focus areas. About 8 years ago, I started an EdTech startup also, mainly looking at education through digital means, online classes, starting with IIT coaching. But that was my main focus, was to look at transforming science and math education. That's something that we have been able to do and grow. And during this pandemic, of course, we have been able to reach out to a lot more students as well. That is something that I do as aside. But I'm going to now first focus a bit on the education programs that we work in. At one stage, we worked with government schools, about almost 13,000 government schools across the state of Tamil Nadu, about 2 million children. Currently, we work in about 1,000 villages, 1,063 villages, and 660 government schools, reaching about 80,000 children. I'll basically talk a little bit about our COVID response, but I think it'll be good for people to understand what we've been doing before. And so that gives you an idea, and as well, because that gives a base of what we do. So in each of these villages, we identify a local tutor like this girl or that one, where we train them on basically building confidence in children through activities, evening classes, about 3 hours, 4 hours of classes every evening. A lot of games, activities, focus on learning outcomes mainly, because we found that lots of kids in government schools, particularly rural areas, they are not even able to read after 5-6 years of schooling. Read, do simple subtraction, even basic skills are they're lagging behind. So our focus was on getting their confidence built up. And for example, this is a skill chart that we use. So the teacher basically assesses each child, and there is no cross mark. If you notice, you either succeed on a skill or you will succeed on the skill after a month. So every month we would keep conducting this. So the idea is for the children to basically say, I have learned these things. And we periodically conduct like a small certificate giving function. Small things like I can read a sentence is itself a celebratory activity, because you have to understand most of these kids come from very, very poor families where the parents have not gone to school, or they've gone to school and dropped out after 4th. So no books at home, nothing at all. So in some sense, this kind of support structure is very critical, because we work in villages where if you look at the average family income, it is something like 3,000-4,000 rupees. You're talking about like a $50 monthly family income, the entire family's income, and they have to survive in that context. So I'll give you an example of what we do. We started an English program because one of the reasons, one of the things that we found, a lot of kids, even when we do math and we started teaching Tamil and so on, they had this underconfidence feeling that I cannot speak in English. I cannot, this is not something for me. But the guys who can speak in English, the students, kids who can speak in English, they are better off and they are somehow superior. So how do you break this? So we said, we'll get you to speak, not only speak, you will teach. So they came, like for example, we would conduct like a 15, 20-minute class session, and then they would walk. So there was an old Amitabh Bachchan movie, I think, and in Tamil Nadu, it was a Rajinikanth movie also, where he couldn't speak. And then when finally there was a party or something, he comes and says, I can walk English, I can talk English. So we decided we'll call this walk and talk program. So the kids learn, they walk around, and then they teach the parents, they teach the adults in the village, get them into conversation. Amazing amount of confidence. Because not only are they learning, they are like talking to adults, they are making fun of them, they are also teaching them. And that basic, and then parents are looking at them very proudly saying, my daughter is speaking in English, my son is speaking in English. And I think that really made a big difference. So this kind of community involvement in the program is something that was is very critical to what we do. And almost every 2 weeks or so, we conduct a small role play kind of thing where the entire community gathers and watches. So in fact, one of the things we told our tutors, because many of them couldn't speak, we told them it doesn't matter. The Britishers had come here and occupied the country and looted it for years and years. So it's okay, we can actually spoil the English language. It is not important that they speak grammatically. It is important they speak confidently. It could be wrong, but as long as they speak it confidently, that is what matters. Because the goal of the program is not grammatically correct language. Because ultimately, how does it matter if a child does not know to speak a sentence properly or is not able to basically do some fraction addition? But if the child loses confidence, then a lot of it is lost. So if we can build confidence, everything else comes back. So that is the focus of our program. So every program, constantly celebrating what they are doing. As an example, I'll give you this. We've started tinkering labs. Get a local cycle mechanic to come and train girls here to rip apart a cycle, put it back together. Huge confidence building for both sides. Because the mechanic now feels like I'm a teacher and the kids now are saying, I can repair it. So now these girls are actually repairing cycles in their hamlet. Mobile cell phones. They're opening up a cell phone. They can dismantle it. They can assemble it back. They can find out what is the fault. All of this done by a local mechanic. So we call these tinkering labs. Again, builds up a huge amount of confidence. Because now suddenly the kids who have not even used mobiles are now able to actually take it apart and put it back together. So this is one of our major programs that we have been doing in terms of education. And from 2015, we started a program for getting homes for the homeless. There was a flood. We got started in that, but after that, we got support. A lot of people from the US, a lot of people from Bay Area, particularly IITians and so on, and a lot of their friends, etc. My classmates, many of them supported this program. So what we do is to look at families that have been living in a hut like this, like Sudha has been, and construct a pakka house for them. The family herself, she and her a couple of people around her, neighbors, help in the construction of this house. When we talk to people, we find that this has been a dream. She's been wanting to live in a pakka house for a long, long time. And once we do this, the entire community gets together and says, can we do this in the next house and so on? So, for example, particularly focus on really, really poor families, old people living alone, or disabled people, single mother headed households, families like that. And we basically ensure that for them, it is like a dream come true. Many of them tell us that I always thought I will live in a pakka house. But I didn't realize it's going to actually happen. So it dramatically changes things, because what we find is particularly mothers and younger women with children, like for example, in Sudha's case, she says, now I have a hope for my child. I feel like it's going to transform my entire family. I'm going to start saving. The very first thing that they buy is a small bureau, a small Alameda. So because they want to now start saving things. Because in an earlier situation, in something like this, it's not even safe. So now they feel like they can start saving. Big transformation that we have seen in these, in many of these families. Totally, we have now so far constructed about 450 houses. Our dream, of course, is to construct about 1,000, but we'll probably 5,000, but probably we'll get to 1,000 first and then move on to the next scale. So I would like to talk about COVID relief efforts that we were involved in. Primarily, this was something that was enabled by the fact that we are already working in about 1,000 villages. What we did was, as soon as the lockdown happened, people started contacting us and telling us, asking us that there are a few people who don't have food for tomorrow. Can I do something? Because our volunteers in the local village, almost every village, we have a community level volunteer. So some of them started asking whether we can do something about it. And we started organizing. We went to the government, talked to the police, and they said, we will give you like a special pass, because many of them had known about our work earlier. So with that, we were able to go around even during the lockdown. And totally, we have provided food provisions to about 21,000 families in about 1,465 villages. I'll talk a little bit about the other things. But what we did was not to look at, like, for example, in the beginning, we started with cities and promptly decided other people are supporting cities. So we started going more into rural areas. And even that, not everybody in the village identify particularly vulnerable sections, particularly vulnerable families who are not getting ration, rice, PDS, who are going hungry, provide food for them, like Irular community, Arundhadiyar community, tribal families, families like that, disabled people, very old people, and so on. Like, for example, when this, like, just give you an example of this hamlet. By the time, the day this volunteer day, we visited the hamlet first time to kind of do a small survey. She lives in a nearby area, but by the time she finished all her rounds to the other villages and came here, they were not eating, they had not eaten anything for about 7 days, 6 to 7 days. They were only drinking some kind of a gruel kind of thing, some powder mixed with water. Nothing, absolutely no ration, rice, nothing at all. So immediately we organized, it's a small hamlet, about 16 families, but this kind of support was absolutely necessary. And we have been continuing this even during, for example, Independence Day. After the lockdown was lifted, many people still didn't have jobs. Like, this is a community, blind community. The government had provided some infrastructure for them and homes and a place for them to stay. But providing them food was not in anybody's, going to the ration shop, getting it was not even possible. So ensuring that these kinds of families are getting this support. Of course, a lot of sanitation workers did so much work across the cities. And one of the things that we were able to do was to reach out to them. One thing immediately after the lockdown that we started doing, and we realized that when we were doing our relief efforts, many families had used up a little bit of the working capital. So you're thinking, look, this person is basically being a phenol seller. They basically make this phenol thing for cleaning, like cleaning liquid. And he had used that up, the family had used this up for feeding themselves during the lockdown. We're talking about a very, very large lockdown, long period of lockdown, right? So every family, whatever they had saved up, small enterprises that they were running, were completely out of working capital. So we started supporting people, small amounts, 3,000 to 5,000 rupees, but that got them restarted because now they could go to the shop, get things started. Like, for example, this lady, she was struggling at that point because she said, I know where to go buy things and sell. I don't have the money because I've spent the money now. And if you go out to a money lender, the money lender charges such huge amount, like 100 rupees. You have to pay back 10 rupees every day. You are effectively talking about 3,650% interest. Like, you can't, it's unheard of. You can't imagine what that kind of thing will do. So you go like 1,000 rupee loan, end of the day, you return back 100 rupees. Effectively, that is end of your, there's no possibility of generating any income at all. So providing them some kind of a grant to get them started was a very, very important thing. So we've been doing this now. Like, for example, this lady was a teacher. She lost her job. And then because schools are anyway closed down and so on. So we helped her start, we identified what she could do and helped her start a tiffin center. Totally, we were able to help about 1,800 families so far who have restarted their livelihoods. This is a process, this is something that we are continuing. It's a small amount of money from our perspective, but it makes such a big difference. Tiffin shops, vegetable vendors, like people who are going around, like this fellow here, basically has a small cycle with ice. You can't even think it's a nice enterprise. I mean, think about entrepreneurship. People don't have fridge. So this guy gets up early in the morning, 4 o'clock, goes and buys ice and comes and distributes it because it's very hot. So people use this to cool their cool water and cool a lot of things. So just selling ice. So in enterprises that we may not even have thought of, people have innovated and come up with it. That this kind of a lockdown really crashed their business. And so we don't have a VC network to basically support them. But if you think of it this way, I think this is very critical support that is happening at this point. Right now, we have a list of almost 5,000 people that we need to support, as our team is slowly reaching out to them, checking out whether they'll be able to get started, give them one small amount of grant, and next round, then provide them a little bit of an additional loan as well. So we are organizing this. As an example, for example, this girl, Laila, had lost her husband about a few months before we met her. We met her in April, I think January, her husband had passed away, and she was really struggling with these two kids. When we gave her relief material, we talked to her about what is going to be your plan, future, etc. She broke down. And basically there was no plan at all. She was kind of struggling with what to do. And we helped her organize, took her because her in-laws village, there was nobody to support her, took her back to her parents' village and helped her start a small tiffin center in the village. Now she's actually saved a little bit of money from the tiffin center, and she started a small shop as well in her hamlet. So we also started, like for example, nutrition. Many of these villages where we said, what do you do for vegetables? What do you do next? People are free, but they are not doing anything at that point. So we organize seeds. You have a small place near you don't have to worry about it, because in most of these hamlets, you have a little bit of space there. We help them start kitchen gardens. And today we have about 2,610 kitchen gardens that we've started in the last about 1.5 to 2 months now. And we hope to expand this to almost like 30,000-40,000 kitchen gardens in all of the villages. So one thing, because I was also involved in the EdTech programs, I've been involved in the EdTech programs, we were developing an app mainly for IIT coaching and all of this. So what we did with our technology team was to say, can you quickly change it? Because many of the kids from rural areas did not have access to a live synchronous program. Like for example, Zoom requires your internet to be available both ways at the same time. And this kind of continuous internet access, I mean, India is slowly moving into the digital age, but very slowly. By the time it reaches villages, it's going to be a long time. So what we felt was, can we do something where some intermittent internet should be enough for kids to get the lesson, download it, and then they can access it anytime during the week. And so we started developing a lot of lessons for them. And right now and we did a small survey, about 45% children in rural areas have access for about an hour. It may not be their phone, it may be their mama's phone or some uncle's phone, auntie's phone, nearby, next neighbor's phone. So they can get access to it for about an hour because they're willing to give it for education purpose. So we started, like in orphanages, of course, we need to kind of do a more planned version. So we put in like a projector and so on and started classes in some of these centers. But in villages, what we did was to identify kids who have access to a mobile. And then about 20,000 children, 20,000 plus children have now started learning using mobiles. And we have now kids in the US who are now making lessons for them. Today morning, we had a small session where some of them are conducting classes for them, where the kids are able to access like a synchronous session that's happening. Some of them are actually developing, like, for example, environment on astronomy. One kid is very happy with astronomy. So he's basically developed a small package of lessons on astronomy, which is something we are going to provide to these children. So we are doing this now in many, many places. So I made some of the videos in English as well as in mathematics. So they look at a video, then they answer a question, then the question and whether they get it right or not, and then they can go to the next question. Really using EdTech in a way in which we can reach out to these kids. In hamlets where none of the kids are able to access, then we have got some tablets that we've got people to donate and then provided it to the children. So they can then exchange. One tablet is then shared by about 5 to 6 children. So they learn it and then they move on to the next one. So we built in some multi-user kind of capabilities into the app. And so that's something that is happening. So basically, we have a good team of people on the ground. So ultimately, all this is possible because of that. We have both volunteers in the US helping us raise funds and support a lot of this, because as soon as we started and we said we need people to help us with our fundraising and so on, a lot of people from, many of them from IIT background, my seniors, juniors, my own classmates and so on, said we will contribute and started supporting. That made a big difference. And on the ground, every village having a local volunteer also makes a huge difference. So thank you once again for the opportunity. Anybody who would be interested in supporting or joining our efforts, please do, because there's a lot that needs to be done, both in the education sector, because with the pandemic now, one of my biggest worries is kids, particularly rural area, have not had regular classes now for several months. We're talking about like 8-9 months, and this is fragile learning even at the best of the situations. So many of them have forgotten things. So making sure that we can reach education to them is something that is very, very critical. So at very small cost, we will be able to reach out to thousands of children, making sure that they're able to improve the learning quality, at least get back to where they were before, and hopefully much more than that going forward. Because I feel that the fact that we are going into a digital-based learning program helping entrepreneurs come up in the rural areas. I think these are not just solutions for a short-term post-pandemic. It is also something that we can think of as long-term solutions to transform rural India. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Balaji. That the talk was really inspiring. I mean, I'm pretty sure you're going to get a lot of people to reach out to you after this. We are really short of time, but I do want to take on one question from our esteemed panelists. Do you expect to be paid back as an organization? Are there micro lending organizations that you would recommend if someone wanted to deposit money with them?
Yeah, there are micro lending organizations, many of them. There are microfinance groups also. Earlier, we had conducted like this self-help group. I was part of several self-help group movements where it would be given as a loan and then people will repay back. But in this current situation, what we have told most of the people that we are working with, because we know that they have used that money just to survive in this context. So we don't know whether they'll be able to repay in 2 months' time or 6 months or so. We don't know whether they may even be able to repay. Also because their businesses did get a hit in a very, very significant way. I mean, you're talking about people who are earning through the business. The business would make like 4,000 or 5,000 rupees a month, right? So for them to repay that working capital through that process is going to be tough. So what we have done is to say, if you want to make a donation back, that's what we tell the people who are taking this up. So we give it to them as a zero interest loan grant model, but it is a loan or a grant depending on how their situation is, because it's like an honor system. In fact, there are some of the places people who have started doing it successfully have actually repaid. So what we have done is to create like a local fund for which they are also in some sense, managers of the fund. So we then use that to do a second round of grant making or loan support for other people in the same set of villages. So we have started that kind of a process, but some people have not been able to repay. That's why we don't want to make it into a loan model at this point of time. In a different situation, normal circumstance, I think it would have been okay. But this was an entrepreneur, a village entrepreneur who struggled because it's not like they wanted to be entrepreneurs. They were almost pushed into it because they had to just make their ends meet. And so they've started something, and then this lockdown completely is an external influence that blocked them. We feel it is not fair at this point to kind of give it to them as a loan, particularly with an interest or even with zero interest, but make it a definite loan that they have to repay. But there are, like, for example, there is an organization called Rangde, which in fact, they also contacted us and said, can we give, because they realized what we were doing. See, our biggest strength is we are able to identify genuine people. So therefore, when we give them, we know that we have local people to say whether their business is doing well or not. So we give it like collectives. So people know that what they have, if they're starting to make money, they are repaying. But it is left at their discretion. We think of it as a grant. And if they repay, then that money is being used to help somebody else. So that's
sounds good. Sounds good. And again, because of shortage of time, we do have more questions. Balaji, please take them up in the Q&A section. Someone who already wants to know if you have openings for online teaching. So here you go. The talk really worked. Now, handing it back to you, Nidhi.